Today we have a great panel ready to speak to the services and supports and recommendations for the community. I'd like to start by introducing Dr. Rollo? Nixon? Doctor? Not doctor. Mister, please excuse me. He reports himself as a polyglot, world-traveling biofil, and an erstwhile international lawyer who devotes his professional time to helping disabled veterans and Social Security disability benefit claimants win benefits. When he's not working, he is often home being tackled by his 4 children with the full encouragement of his lovely wife, Lubov. Did I pronounce that correctly? Lyubov. With my apologies to her, I'm sure she is lovely. Okay, thank you for understanding. Without further ado, I ask you to present the search for alternative models to address disability supports and challenges. Thank you.
All right, can you all hear me? Is it loud enough? Are you sure? Okay, that sounds better. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So, alternative models of support. So first of all, having seen many of the great speakers today, it's truly inspiring seeing the other presenters and just hearing their perspectives, and I'm going to echo some of what they have said. I'm going to quote one of you who's over there because he said something that really resonated, but I wanted to start by asking who here is a law student? Excellent. Thank you for being here. When I was in your seat more than 20 years ago, you wouldn't have caught me dead here, okay? I didn't go to law school to do this type of work that I do. I own a disability firm, right? I help veterans, I help Social Security disability claimants. I didn't go to law school to do that, although I did go to law school to be a voice for those who don't have one, and that's central to why I do what I do. But I work in French and in English, and I've worked in New York, I've worked in Tunisia, I used to work in Dubai, okay? And those are the types of things I went to law school. I went to law school to do those types of things. These are the things I wanted to do with my career, right? And of course, life happens, Lehman collapses, you then find yourself cut loose and drifting and traveling, and it's a lot of fun. But in an interesting way, because of my wife, right, I found myself entering the space as a disability lawyer because my wife, who is from the former Soviet Union, has a father, and the work I was doing, I didn't think he would understand at all. And so I took a 9-to-5 job with a disability lawyer so I could tell him, hi, this is who I am, this is the work I do, this is what I make, can I marry your daughter, please? And so that's what I did, and I started working for a family friend named Peter Gorton, and we moved to a place in New York we'd never been to before, and then the wheels came off and the ceiling fell in. And we found ourselves living in a place where it was a cultural disconnect, and I was doing this work that was just driving me crazy. I said, wait a minute. I used to have to advise people about their impending Foreign Corrupt Practices Act violations and how we could help them, and now I'm just asking these questions in these administrative hearings over and over and over, and going through these boring medical details over and over and over. And so what had to happen to me is something had to get a hold of my heart to show me, no, this is what God wants you focusing on. And I remember some of those cases, okay? So let's start with the family of 4.
You'll see it on the screen.
Can you see it? Y'all can see it, right? Okay, good. So, family of 4. 4 people, 2 parents younger than 30, 2 minor children younger than 10. All of the family members were developmentally disabled. No family members were employed. They can apply for benefits under the Social Security Act and its regulations. 4 people applied. The bureaucracy granted benefits for 1 person and denied the other 3. So my old boss and I succeeded in getting benefits for persons 2, 3, and 4. It was instructive for me because I remember having to prepare the mother and wife in that family for her hearing. There are 5 of us in a 9-by-7-foot room with 2 chairs, a desk, and a table. And it was bedlam. It was absolutely bonkers. The husband was diving under the table trying to tackle his kids who were crawling all over everything. And I was furious, but not at them. I was furious that 50 feet down the hallway were bureaucrats who work for our government, the US government, who saw these people but denied that these people presented disabilities and should be awarded benefits. That was one case I remember winning and felt very great satisfaction. Here's another one. I win the case, and in Social Security disability hearings, you usually do not know if you prevailed or not at the end of the proceeding. You're usually told you'll get the decision in 90 days or something like that, okay? Well, the judge said, he's retired, I know him well, he said, okay, I'm going to award benefits. And then he started crying. And then I look up, the judge is crying. I look at the recorder who's sitting across from me, she's crying. I look at my client, she's crying, and I'm the only one in the room with dry eyes. And I'm saying to myself, wow, what happened? I guess I did something good today. These were the milestones on the way of making me someone who's passionate about advocating for the disabled and their families, okay? I've done that work for almost 14 years straight as a Social Security disability lawyer, and I've been an accredited VA disability attorney with the Department of Veterans Affairs for 10 years this month. It's extremely rewarding work, and for the one person who's in here who's in law school, you may have heard, like I heard at Rutgers, either you can do this work where you don't like yourself, you don't like your clients, you have no life and no time, but you make tons of money, or you do this stuff that's really meaningful, you're passionate, you're doing justice in the earth, but you're broke, okay? Yeah, they were lying. They were lying. I've made money hand over fist doing both, and you do really good work. You can go to bed with satisfaction. You can wake up excited about the challenges you're gonna have. I remember waking up not excited, dragging myself to big law. I remember waking up not excited and dragging myself to other things. So it's great work. It's great work. But there are challenges. And one of the areas that their challenges are in supports, okay? I think one of the best ways to show that is through some of my other case studies. So, we're gonna call this woman Bathsheba, okay? Single black female, aged around 35, completely illiterate. Virtually no social supports. Only one sibling and one adult child, okay? So I was able to win her SSI benefits even though she can't read. When she can't read, that means she can't read your contract. She can't read the documents that request information from her. She can't read any of the Social Security notices that tell her things. We won her benefits from 2,400 miles away during the COVID pandemic, thank God, okay? Here's the issue, okay? Under the Social Security Act, she can get benefits from her father's work record. That would yield significantly more money on a monthly basis, and there would be no constraints based on how much capital you have in the bank. There are for SSI, which she gets, there are not for SSDI. Therefore, if she were to get an inheritance or something like that from one relative, she could lose her benefits. Right. She can't get the benefits because somebody in the state of New Jersey produced a birth certificate that left off the father's name. Does anybody in here know the actual function of a birth certificate? Let me give you a hint. It's not to put the mother's name down. You know who the mother is. The child just came out. It's to put the father's name down so you can now track somebody down who's responsible for the existence of that person. So she's still dealing with this because we need a family law lawyer in New Jersey who can sort it out, who's not going to charge any money, and who can deal with the logistics and communication issues, caused by somebody who cannot read. She needs new support models. Next. Little Bo Duke, obviously not his name, a reference to a TV show I used to love as a child growing up in the 80s. Anyway, minor child receiving SSI for developmental delays, attends public school, raised by his grandmother in the South. 4 different times Social Security tried to seize his benefits. He's in public school. So all they need to really do is seek the school records and then check to see have his developmental delays resolved or not. If the answer is no, then let the status quo continue. Well, that's not what they did. 4 times they just tried to seize his benefits. Grandmother fought them 3 times, hired me the 4th time, we prevailed. What annoyed me is that when the judge recognized in the hearing that, yes, I'm going to continue benefits, there was no apology. There was no, well, why did they have to hire you and spend your time and spend their money? No, there were no apologies. And I didn't like that. This child needs new support models, okay? Mountain man. Single man, age 50 plus, complex medical history. He's a recipient of 3 kidneys, okay? As a result of the most recent transplant, he developed type 2 diabetes. Oh, but by the way, the anti-rejection medication for the kidney that really is somebody else's, right, has caused him cancer 3 times, most recently last year. This man has not worked since 2012. So what business does Social Security what business does Social Security have saying that he's no longer disabled? Well, what do they base that on? They have a 5-step process. The first step is called substantial gainful activity. This man hasn't worked since 2012. There's no SGA problem. So what are they looking at? I have no idea. Okay, I have no idea. He's been receiving his SSDI for more than 10 years now. When we lost at the ALJ level, they then turned around and issued him an overpayment of about 70 grand. This man has not worked since 2012. He's dealing with cancer virtually every year. What is he supposed to do? This one's still going on. He needs alternative support models. Peter's daughter, single woman in her 30s, suffered a TBI as an adult, had to relearn how to walk, continues to experience cognitive and physical delays. I don't know if you saw it, 48 Hours did a special. I think Anderson Cooper was the one doing it, but they did a special about SSDI overpayments. It was this big thing. It's still a problem. But anyway, she had one of those. We successfully fought it. We were able to win because we were able to show that the agency bureaucrats knew that this woman had cognitive difficulties and that she was not understanding what they were talking about, failed to appoint somebody else to that role, and so they should waive whatever overpayment she had. So, these examples to me are telling of a circumstance where the disabled in our community and their families need support that they're not getting, and I think it behooves us to have a real gutsy vision and then bring that to them. I want disabled people and their families to get all the support that they need, to live whole and community integrated lives. And so in the search for alternative models for fulfilling those needs, I thought of Jewish philanthropic tradition. And it's like, okay, Dorollo, you're an evangelical, what are you talking about? Okay? Touro is a good place to talk about this, and I can talk about the last time I addressed a subject like this. I was writing in law school. I wrote a paper comparing, thank you. I wrote a paper comparing Moshe ben Maimon, known as Maimonides also, with the imminent, now retired federal circuit judge, Richard A. Posner. So let's go briefly to Maimonides. Where are you? All right, cool. So, one of his seminal works is entitled, as many of you most likely know, is entitled Mishneh Torah. It's a legal code summarizing all aspects of Jewish law. Completed more than 900 years ago, it remains one of the most important books about Jewish legal theory and practice ever written. Jewish law addresses how the faith community should support the poor, the disabled, the marginalized, and the alien. And Maimonides prescribed how to help these individuals in his book in a section called the Book of Seeds. Chapter 10 of that section, in it, he outlines 8 degrees of charitable giving in rank order. The lowest is grudging giving, okay? And at the highest, okay, it includes offers of gifts or loans, entering into a partnership, or providing someone a job so that he, in this case, might become self-sufficient. In other words, the vision of the community, as expressed by Maimonides, was to lift up those in need by providing what they needed so they could become self-sufficient. It implies a recognized standard of living up to which the givers worked to lift up the downtrodden. It indicates that work was not only important, but central to fulfilling the ethic of charity. All members of the community were obligated to give, and all of this aid was private and voluntary. And I think as we begin to take that ethic and focus it on what we deal with, we can come up with some exciting alternatives to the status quo. Okay? And I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to try to address some of those. I can divide them into pre-entitlement and post-entitlement. Okay? Pre-entitlement means that there are federal streams of benefits that these people could qualify for, but they have to apply. The way our system is set up, which literally means the way Congress wrote the rules, and it's Congress this time, not always the agency, it's really hard as an attorney to get paid to help people do these things. Well, that means, in my opinion, found a local community-based organization that employs people to do that. Because when you know how to do these applications, you can really move the needle. One of the things we will do for free at my law firm is when people call and they have a compassionate allowance, we will do their application. I've done them myself. I've done one this year. Okay? It takes me 20 to 30 minutes because I've done this before. Okay? What it means is the person who is dying of that condition is going to win his or her benefits in about 5 or 6 weeks, rather than being sucked into a system where on average it's going to take 2 to 3 years. I find that very fulfilling. We need to institutionalize that and make it something that people can give to and will have its impact. So that's an example of a pre-entitlement support. Post-entitlement supports. There are many options. I think what's lacking is just a mindset that looks at it and says, hey, the status quo is not tenable, okay? When I came into this room earlier today, I overheard a conversation that struck me because I didn't know what year it was occurring in. I didn't know if it was occurring in 2026, 2016, 2006, 1996. In other words, they're talking about a moribund status quo that we have to challenge. Thank you. That would work too. Do I have to turn this off?
I'm gonna. Thank you. I don't think that Dr. Shore has one. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Makes you think, so we appreciate it. Our next speaker is Dr. Shore. Dr. Shore is a professor at Adelphi University and a leading international educator, consultant, and author on autism and neurodiversity. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Well, it's great to be here. And I'm going to talk about, let's first make sure, can everybody hear me? All right, good. Participatory-based research. Participatory research in prioritizing autistic mental health. And so what this is about is listening to autistic voices. And it started after I gave a panel presentation on autistic intelligence. And I'd come down to the front, and I was accosted by this OT. It's always an OT. And the OT started talking about doing medical research in autism. And I thought, well, why would I want to do that? My focus is on matching best practice and reasoned practice to individual profiles, but okay, I'll listen. And she talked about the importance of the need to find the most challenging healthcare issue facing autistic people. And not only that, we needed to find out from autistic people. So rather than talking to therapists, parents, doctors, educators, and others, what they think autistic people need, we should talk to autistic individuals. All right, now this is beginning to sound interesting. We then continued to talk about how can we do this in a way that involves autistic people. So in other words, having autistic people meaningfully and authentically engage in the research. So we take it a few months later. We applied for and got accepted for a $250,000 project award from Patient Care Outcome Research Institute. And what we ended up doing was initially creating a lead team that was half autistic and half undiagnosed. I'm just going to leave it at that. So that was just to show that autistic people can also be inclusive and include non-autistic and non-neurodivergent individuals. We then went on to create a community council of mostly autistic people who were paid for their knowledge. And that was a big gap that we found, is that so often at conferences and other events related to autism, there'll be a lot of talk about autism, and the conference, this one being accepted because there's a lot of autistic involvement in this conference. But often with some of the very big conferences, you have these highly paid, fancy research scientists and medical people talking about stuff. Oh, let's be inclusive. All right, we'll find an autistic person to give the closing keynote, and usually they don't get paid. And especially when we're talking about a population who, according to the National Autistic Society of the UK, has a chronic 88% under and unemployment rate. So what that means is only 12% of us autistic people are meaningfully employed to our capacity. And there's certain things in the Torah and the Bible that tells us that we should not withhold pay from people. That's a terrible thing to do. So we need to pay people for their expertise. And so why study health? Because recently, at least at that time it was recent, a study came out from Drexel University suggesting that autistic people have a shorter lifespan than the general population. Well, autistic people, unless there's other conditions involved, physiologically, we're pretty much the same as anybody else. So what is the reason? It's not due to physiology, but perhaps it's due to something else. And it may relate to navigating the medical establishment, which is difficult for people who aren't autistic. For example, I have a friend who's 70 years old. She spent her lifetime supporting her autistic son, spent her lifetime running a large organization that stretched from Manhattan to Montauk, focusing on supporting autistic people, masters in social work, and it was barely that she could barely manage her own medical situation. She was in need of some, not huge, but not small, moderate, some sort of medical procedure. And she could barely manage it on her own. And she's not autistic. So that's another issue that we face. So since this was an engagement award, there were two parts to it. Half focused on how do we promote and study engagement of autistic people, meaningful and authentic engagement. The other half was the question, the scientific piece. What's the most challenging healthcare issue facing autistic individuals? So as we look at the engagement component, we developed an engagement and compensation guide where we looked or considered what we termed as the 4 C's of engagement. And what are those 4 C's? Competence, communication, compensation, and consideration. So for competence, we assume that people are competent and that autistic people understand what you're saying. We also use language that is not deficit disability disorder based. So instead of talking about sensory dysfunction, which places the challenge on the individual medical model, we use sensory differences. And that opens us up to look at ways that we can modify the environment to support the autistic person, and at the same time, modifications that we make, it might be at work, it might be in the community, it might be in education, end up benefiting everybody else as well. So that's just one example of the competence piece. We work with the autistic person, not against the characteristics. We work with them as equal partners. And then there's communication. What's the best way to communicate? Initially, our emails were these big, long walls of text, and we had a grand single-digit response rate when we wrote those emails. So then we had to revise how we did this. Minimize words. Have headings, purpose, bullet, one line. Details, one line. What's the question? What's the action that we expect? It might be informational, you might have to do something. When is the deadline? And that's it, just these simply presented details as to what the email's about. And in that way, it looks like I'm getting the 5.
5 minutes.
Oh, it means that there's 300 seconds left. So those are the two of the 4 C's that we focused on in creating this engagement compensation guide. If you want, come to me and I can give you the link to download it for free. And so we focused on what is good for autistic people. What are our priorities? What are our principles of engagement, such as prioritizing each other's mental health needs, to communicate openly, to realize that we make mistakes, and then we learn through them. So what are the results? What's the method? Well, 2 years of a couple of large conferences, focus groups, surveys, an N of, I think, 296. The results, we got our results. And what bubbled to the top was access to mental health support. That is what's most on the minds of autistic people. And unbeknownst to us, there was another organization in the UK called Autistica doing similar research, which also came up with the same result. And another one in Australia that did similar research and came up with the results, with the same results. Well, that project ended. We kept our community council alive, and we'd meet until we came to the next project, which is currently a $9.2 million 5-year grant comparing 2 suicide prevention interventions. Because we also know that one of the leading causes of death in autistic individuals is suicide, and that's under mental health. And then we got another $3.1 million grant to compare a CBT protocol with a mindfulness-based MBT protocol. And we'll take a look at what the differences are. My sense is that we'll find out that because of the huge diversity that we find in autism, that one approach will work for this group, and this other approach may work better for this other group. Just a guess, we gotta wait for the details. So in brief, that's the participatory research that I'm involved in, where we meaningfully and authentically include autistic individuals, which then can be generalized to anything else that we do, such as education, developing an educational program, or workspace. Ask an autistic person what would be helpful for accommodations, whatever it may be. Anyways, if you have more questions, I'm here for the rest of today. I'm here tomorrow. It's a pleasure to speak with you, and thank you for all you're doing to promote fulfilling and productive lives for autistic individuals. Thank you.
Thank you. I cannot do the math to tell you how many seconds you had left, but that was nicely done, and thank you for sharing. Our third panelist is Dr. Veronica Weinert, known as Ronnie. She is at the University of Notre Dame Clinical Law Center's inaugural legal fellow. where she has co-developed the Special Education Law Clinic. She is both licensed attorney and an occupational therapist in the state of Indiana and uses her therapeutic expertise to offer comprehensive client-centered representation, and her presentation is titled Measurable Mastery, a data-driven approach to managing ADHD in career, home, and health. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Shore, you're right. It is always the OTs. And my family's watching. I'm sure I will never hear the end of that. So yes, it is always us. So it's a little bit after 4. I want everyone to take a deep breath, just kind of sitting for a long time, shake it out, whatever you need to do. And then we'll kind of jump in. Today, we are going to be going down the rabbit hole into Wonderland to discuss measurable mastery. So I'm going to talk about using data to transform our personal lives, and I am pulling both from my professional experiences, but mostly from my lived experience. A little bit about me. So I'm an occupational therapist and an attorney, but I also have ADHD, and what I'm talking about today can definitely be applied to other kinds of personal needs, but because my personal experiences with ADHD, that's the lens that I'm looking at it through. What got me thinking about this topic as it applies to non-clinicians in our own lives was my work with doing precision occupational therapy with my clients. So precision occupational therapy is essentially just a very personalized approach where we take in all kinds of information about the person that we're treating. We look at their strengths, we look at needs, we look at their culture, and we really tailor the intervention to support that specific person's needs, using their strengths to do it, and making sure that what the outcomes that we're aiming for are actually meaningful to them. And the whole goal is to enhance wellness and quality of life. This is what it looks like to do data-driven decision-making in a clinical setting in OT. So it's a very systematic guide, and we go through each of the different layers to then be able to make sure that we're implementing the right interventions. But this is not how we would do it in our own lives, because it's too complex. We're not going to be able to have that kind of more objective insight into what's going on necessarily. So I wanted to talk through this as a case study. And for our case study, we are going to be talking about the white rabbit. So the white rabbit is the court herald for the Queen of Hearts. And he's very driven, he's hardworking, he's very observant, but he is frequently late for work. And this results in a lot of anxiety because the queen, if she loses her temper, he will lose his head. So looking at what he's done to try to fix the problem, because he knows, I can't keep being late for work, I'm gonna lose my head. And so he's tried to fix the problem on his own. He bought a really beautiful clock to go in his home that chimes right when he needs to leave. He even took his beloved watch to someone to try to fix it, which ultimately did not work. But he ended up in this situation of, I've tried so many things and it's not making a difference. I'm still late, I'm still struggling, it's hopeless, there's no way to fix it. And this is something that, even though this is a silly example, I think a lot of us can relate to his expression and his feeling of, I'm trying. I've tried, I've bought so many different clocks and systems, and I have calendars and planners and digital planners, and I'm still not getting to where I want to be. Not through lack of want and not through lack of trying. So with Mr. Rabbit, I would ask him, all right, let's kind of back up. You've already tried to fix the problem, but we don't really know what's causing the problem. We just know that the result is you're late to work. And so first I want to have him track his arrival time and let us know, are you late or are you on time? If he was late, let's identify the reason. No judgment here, just pointing to the fact of I got out of bed late or I didn't set my alarm the night before, whatever that may be. If he wasn't late, we want to identify, okay, what went well? Because we want to use a strength-based approach as much as possible because that will help us to feel confident, it'll help things to go smoother, and then it can help the results just kind of keep on rolling. So his day at work starts at 9. So on Monday, he was late, 7 minutes. Tuesday late, Wednesday pretty late, Thursday late, Friday a little bit early. So then we have to go through and find out, okay, what is causing his arrival times? On Monday, he couldn't find where Marianne, his housekeeper, had put his white gloves, and he can't show up to court without his white gloves on. He will lose his head. On Tuesday, he could only find one of his gloves. Wednesday, he lost track of time at a tea party. Okay, maybe I'd recommend switching to after-work tea parties. Thursday, his gloves were stained from his carrots the night before, and then he couldn't find the backup pair. And then when we get to Friday and he was early, we'll say, okay, well, what went well that enabled you to be early? Well, Marianne was able to find his gloves for him on Friday because she works from Friday to Sunday. Great, okay. So this is just a week snapshot, but let's look at this week and see if there's any common denominators. And already we're seeing that the gloves had an impact on 4 of the 5 days and negatively impacted 3 of the 5 days. So, okay, I guess for him, what I'm starting to think is it's not likely that you don't have, the awareness of when you need to leave, the awareness of, how far ahead or behind you're running. It's actually because you're not able to find what you need in order to go. So what he could do, now that he's identified the root of what is causing his tardiness at work, is, okay, let's fix it. So you are relying on Marianne to know where your gloves are, and she's only there Friday to Sunday. That is not going to be sustainable. So let's see if we can maybe find a different place and store your gloves all the time in that top drawer by vanity, and even put a Post-it note on the mirror. Gloves are in the top drawer. And so if he starts doing that and it gets rid of the problem, great. He can now go to work happy, on time, not going to lose his head. But the nice part about doing this from a data-driven perspective is that, let's say it didn't actually stop him from being late to work. Well, that's one little branch that we can say, okay, that's not the cause of it. And things are going well there. He can always find his gloves. He's going to have a little bit of a confidence boost knowing he knows where the gloves are, but also the process of elimination. All right, I've eliminated one thing that could have been causing me to be late. Let's go through the data again. Let's track it again and see what else is impacting me. And I know that this was a silly example, but I really do think that if we just take a look at our lives non-judgmentally, look at the facts, we're going to prevent ourselves from just suffering against the reality. My lovely husband, I think he has seen, come home to like so many different to-do lists everywhere, whiteboard calendars, just so many different ways that I've tried to get my executive functioning to do what I want it to do consistently. And it wasn't until he set up one single Google Calendar with specific categories where I track everything and I always have it, and he also has access to, that we were able to fix the problem. And for me, it was about having something with me all the time, which is in my phone. But this can apply to really anything in our lives, any kind of behavior that we are hoping to change or start. If we look at what is going on underneath, then it will help us more accurately make that kind of progress. And then here are my references, and if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to chat about them. But thank you for having me. It's been really wonderful hearing from all of you.
A couple more minutes, but thank you. That was excellent, and thank you. That leaves us enough time for questions. I'm not sure if there's somebody reading the questions from the Zoom component, or if there's questions here Is there a mic for hearing? Thank you.
Thank you. This question is for Dr. Weinert. So with this methodology that you've just shown us, do you have any recommendations how we might adopt this in the workplace for employees who might be struggling with this and before it becomes a performance issue, and to do this in a non-judgmental way that also doesn't cross the line of like, now I'm doing therapy instead of my actual job of Chief Diversity Officer?
That's a great question. And I think it's something where if you're looking at it as we're just trying to collect data to see what's happening. We already see the result. We're just trying to get behind those doors and see like what is causing this. So I think if it's not a question of we need to fix this right now, take care of it, and more a question of let's find out what supports are going to actually be helpful. If it's maybe having an office in a quieter part of the building so that there's less getting distracted from communications with coworkers, maybe that's it. But, we don't want to just jump to fixing the problem when we don't actually know what's causing it. So I think having the approach of non-judgmentally just getting to know yourself, getting to know your habits and behaviors can be a less, vulnerable starting point, and just going to the facts.
Thank you. Can I ask a follow-up? Do people mind? For the rest of the panel, so when we talk about services and supports, I sometimes grapple with some lived experience too of supporting a loved one with a mood disorder, of the gendered aspect of it. And so like wanting to do this kind of broader universe of support, but as a woman bearing a lot of burden of like, I become the person who needs to know where the white gloves are every single day. Any thoughts? I'm sure you confront this all the time, so just kind of expounding on that.
It's interesting because I think we do see that a lot. And whether it's in a couple and this is the burden the wife is taking, for example, or the mom, absolutely. What I would hope is that, one could lead in one's strengths. And so if that's a strength, I would just say run with it. And if it's not, figure out how to structure it so that the need gets met. Is that easy for me to say as a man with ADHD whose wife is tired of picking up it? Yes, it is. But, just being able to have that thing that then doesn't set me off on a tangent for 15 minutes, I'm so grateful for that, Now, did you say Chief Diversity Officer? Okay, what does that role entail? Because when you said that to the last question, in my head I said, well, wait. Why can't you provide the counseling? Because when I think of alternative supports, I think of stuff like literally like that. Especially the veterans I deal with. I would say the two supports that they need more than anything else, one is alternative ways for men who are veterans suffering from PTSD to actually get care for that disorder outside of VA. And then the second one would be voluntary activities, some of which are straight up work and some of which are not, but that get them out, get them engaged with other people, get them in relationships in the community, get them giving back, and it can ground them and it can help them work through better managing triggers and symptoms. And so that almost never happens. So what happens is I'm on the phone, right, counseling somebody for 45 minutes because I understand where he's at in his cycle of symptoms. And it's exhausting. Frankly, I'm not trained for it, right? Yeah, if I were to make one change going back to where he's sitting, become a physician too, do both. You can do so much more doing both. And not just because you could then author your own treating medical opinions for your clients. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, that was my question. Like, why not do the counseling as well as part of the role?
To your question, the second part of your question about the interpersonal relationship and managing your own needs too. I think it's always a good reminder that you have to put your own oxygen mask on before you can help someone else with theirs. This idea of going to an empty well, there's nothing to draw from if you won't take the time to fill it. So it can be really hard, but I think having conversations in that neutral space of, this is what I need in order to be able to be healthy and whole when I'm interacting with you. I think it's important to set those boundaries and expectations.
Dr. Shore, did you want to add?
Sure. Thinking about looking at it from both viewpoints that we heard here, of course we have to take care of ourselves. What do we need in order to be successful so that we can support another person? And then as we're providing this support, and that includes support for ourselves, what are our strengths? What do we do well? And it doesn't matter that you can do something a certain way, analyze things in a certain way that I can't. That's why God put you here, to do that. And I do things a different way. And together, we both make the world a better place. So it's focusing on strengths. Turning away from the model of deficit, disorder, and disability, and turning towards ability. What can be done to make ability shine, whether it's in yourself or in whomever you're supporting?
There are several more questions. Do we have time for more questions? Okay, great. Thank you so much. We have our law student here that's looking.
Thank you. So this is a question for Mr. Nixon, and the question I have is, how has Trump's Big Beautiful Bill affected people being able to get SSI benefits?
The short answer is I don't know. The long answer is the chief problems I find with people getting the benefits, right, is basically how quickly can you engage an attorney. The forms, I've worked with them for almost 14 years straight. I get them. Someone who's coming to it while suffering from whatever trauma, sensory or other disorder that is affecting how they process that info and their stamina. It's just, they're already starting behind the 8 ball. But yeah, I haven't, surprisingly, because I do disability, the disability benefits I'm fighting for are federal, 2 different agencies. And so obviously changes that the current administration has done affect things. Far less so than I was expecting, frankly. There have been some delays, there have been massive layoffs and things like that. I found myself last year, so let me back up. I also do Federal Tort Claims Act litigation. So usually I'm suing VA employees who have committed medical malpractice against my clients. I do that also, okay? Including in the SDNY. And so, and in the Second Circuit. Anyway, I found myself thanking the AUSAs because they were still at work, or the attorneys who work for the Office of General Counsel at the Department of Veterans Affairs, because they are still at work, still working on cases. They're asking me for extensions, and then they make an offhand remark like, yeah, our staff was cut 60%, 40% of people left, things like that, and I'm astounded. And I'm thanking them as a citizen, right? Even though they're on the other side of the table, I'm thanking them as a citizen because them staying there fighting me, right, is still making our system work. And so there have been far less disruptions than we feared, which is good. But yeah, it's weird. The benefits get paid even when the government shuts down, and so there hasn't been discontinuity because of that. Most ALJs we deal with are pretty fair. There's some who are horrible, and then there's some, frankly, who are asleep at the wheel, but they're just saying yes, and so we'll take it. Because you will fight cases where you have the preponderance of the evidence, you have all of the equities right, all of the feels, and you're getting a no and it doesn't make sense. Like Mountain Man, where it's just like he hasn't worked in more than a decade. That's the very first thing they look at to show improvement isn't what happened medically, it's are you working? You're not working, oh, okay. They actually have to show by a preponderance the improvement. It's a change in what has to be proven by the government in order to get the person to a status where he's no longer disabled. I don't see how they're showing that with no work. Oh, and by the way, here are the extra transplants, and oh, now diabetes. Oh, yeah, now cancer again and again. No idea. We deal with that, you know, and it's a fun battle to do. It's a fun battle to do. It's good to get up in the morning and to be able to go and have that fight. I remember when I started, you just learn about these terrifying conditions that people have. And where there's no warning, you don't know they're coming, it's terrifying. You know, it's terrifying. And so to be able to help those people get the benefits they deserve, the benefits they've worked for, where the agency has no credible counter-argument, none. But because of the bureaucracy, oh, this is denied and this was delayed, and just exhaustion by continuous appointments buried in paperwork they don't understand, it's highly satisfying winning benefits for these people.
Before we go to the next question, I would like to take a minute to attend to the CLE codes. This session's start, CLE code was JHG123. Again, JHG123. And the end CLE code for this panel's discussion is DSA765. Again, DSA765. We have time for one more question, please.
This question is from Mr. Nixon. We're seeing a lot of families who are applying for OPWDD Medicaid waivers as a result of their young children having severe disabilities diagnosed before they're age 3. What we're seeing is a great number of these cases are being rejected. They'll get preliminary approval, then they'll go for the Medicaid waiver, which allows them then to get this wonderful benefit called self-direct, which helps them in the future for housing. And we're now seeing a really significant trend in these rejections. So my question to you is, do you have experience doing the appeals, or would you like to train a bunch of lawyers to do these appeals?
I have some experience through an organization, right? I used to sit on the board of a NYSARC chapter, right? And I didn't address it before, but in terms of my background, I have a cousin I grew up with who either has or continues to receive services from a NYSARC in the county that I'm native to in Western New York. But anyway, through that organization, we had clients where that's what they were involved with, right? Personally, as an attorney, I have one single Medicaid-related appeal procedure I went through. I can see it right now. I got hosed. And so, you know, I know there's stuff to learn, but somebody earlier talked about just have the fight, right? I mean, it's got to be fought, you know. Somebody has to do that. But yeah, it's, and sometimes it's just finding, well, what is the golden thread that we can use to get to the result for the Social Security overpayment whole side of things, which, by the way, they're almost never represented. It's hard to represent them because they will throw the paperwork out because they think it's there by mistake. They'll throw the paperwork out because the protocols in Social Security's computer systems say, do you have an appeal? No. So they throw out your authorization form to represent your own client. It's crazy. I did a hearing less than a mile from here at the federal courthouse over here. The last time I was in Islip 8 years ago. And the very first thing the ALJ said to me is, why are you here? And I was taken aback. And I said, well, you know, I'm here, you know, representing my client, who thankfully was a family member, because that's what the judge understood. And then said, oh, and then he explained his hostility. You know, he said, oh, they're never represented. I didn't know why you were here. I didn't know what was going on. Now, of course, you could have just directed him to the paperwork. Was there a problem in the paperwork, Your Honor? I mean, it's your agency's form. It says why we're here. In other words, there should not have been an issue I could understand where he was coming from. It also helped that he was a veteran, and we talked about that too. But yes, it's that's tough. It's a tough nut to crack. I mean, it may go without saying that maybe a political route would yield more fruit. I don't know. You know, I don't know how connected one may be in the state, but sometimes that's the relief we need. I have a veteran client where, so my main office is in Arizona, right? I had a client whose friend contacted me. Friend was a career paralegal, okay? She contacted me and said, hi, can you help my friend with this? She's a veteran. They sent her all this paperwork saying, we're paying you this pension, and we just found out that you're getting Social Security, so we need 10 years worth of expenses. That friend, the career paralegal, produced 10 years worth of medical expenses, produced them in a spreadsheet. I filed timely our challenge to their notice. They then produced a notice that said, since we received nothing, we're going to find that there's an overpayment, and then they produced a 6-figure, you owe Uncle Sam, pay in 30 days notice. Okay? Thankfully, my client's neighbor is in state government, same party as one of our US senators. 6 days. 6 days. I got a call from the pension center in St. Paul, Minnesota, and an apology. And I was shocked. I was shocked. I was like, that's, okay, this is what power is like. Wow, I don't have it. She does, right? Senator Sinema did. It went away in 6 days. It was scary. Because all of that fighting, all of that, here are the rules, here's what's supposed to happen. We filed our evidence on time. They're either incompetent or lying, right? And we use e-fax. We keep our notices on purpose so that when we're challenged, we can show the paper trail. None of that was complicated. That's why we're in this fight, people, because they're denying people these benefits and putting them in these circumstances where what's the real predictable outcome? Is that she'll kill herself. That's the real predictable outcome. That's what we're trying to not have happen. And that's not even touching what she went through to get to where she is, which you couldn't make a movie out of what she suffered in the Air Force. You couldn't do it. No one would believe that this was allowed to happen. No one would believe it.
I hate to interrupt a
No fighting.
good conversation, but it is my job to do that. On behalf of the audience and our listeners, thank you to each of the panelists for your expertise in sharing them today.
Thank you all so much for another terrific panel. And our final panel of the day will be artistic presentations, followed by dinner and a musical performance.